for this. So hello everyone, welcome to this session today. It's something different that's happening, especially with the like mode of communication. It would be mostly in English, but we welcome Ariell to this discussion today. Just to give a brief history or a brief introduction to people who are new to this session today. So we started Chitral Academic Circle in order to enable this space for us to come together and talk about different things and bring local scholars and also international scholars to this forum to create some kind of academic discussion. And today is the first time that we are bringing someone from outside of Pakistan. So Ariell has this honor to be the first, but we are really grateful to Ariell to be here, especially on a Sunday and after a very busy week. Obviously, we have our term going on right now. So thank you so much, Ariell. And so, as you know, the discussion follows the same format like every Sunday. So we'll start by first, I'll give Ariell some time to introduce herself and kind of share her journey with us. And then we will go into the main kind of, presentation or talk that she's going to give us about why study geography, basically. And the reason is that we have seen how geography is quite a neglected field in Pakistan, and we want that more people consider studying geography and doing more research in geography. So I'll leave that to Ariell. But thank you everyone for joining us today, and I would hand it over to Ariell. If you could please start by just maybe like sharing your journey. Like how did you come to academia, and maybe there were moments that made you decide. It's just so that a lot of people here may also want to go into academia. So we just want to make it like real for us, for younger generation. So Ariell, please.
Thank you so much, Wahid, and everyone here. It's such a delight and an honor to be at the Chitral Academic Circle. I really love what you're doing every Sunday. And if, any ways I can support it in the future, please let me know. And I'm sorry that we're doing this in English, but if anyone needs translation, or if anyone wants to interrupt, or if I should speak slower, just let me know. And feel free to interrupt with questions. It's absolutely fine. We can just kind of have a structured but slightly informal discussion. I have a few slides, and I have, including a kind of little picture of my area where I grew up. So maybe I'll just share those to get started on talking about my journey. And then I will go back to unsharing them again. So let me share these and hopefully see this. So I'm originally from upstate New York, and which is, I don't know if you can see my cursor, but there's an area called Schenectady up here in the middle kind of part of New York State. And so I grew up in a very, very rural area of upstate New York. And I spent most of my childhood doing heavy labor, like collecting wood, because we had a wood burning stove, working with livestock, like goats, which I became very attached to as a young person, and helping fix cars, machines that were broken down, lots of kind of countryside work. And that links to what I'm studying today, which we'll talk about in a little while. But I went to a rural public school in upstate New York. My family was very humble, economically quite humble. My stepdad worked for a local factory, and my mom was kind of an assistant to a veterinarian. And so I studied in this very small high school. There was about 60 people in my graduating class. And then I went on to, I received a scholarship to study at a small liberal arts school, also in upstate New York. And I studied actually anthropology. So I didn't even study, at that point, geography wasn't on my radar. I did not know what geography was either at that point when I was 18, 19 years old. So I studied anthropology. Actually, I first started as a French major. I wanted to become a French language teacher in high school. I was planning to be a high school language teacher. So I studied French for 2 years, and then a good friend of mine said, "Hey, anthropology is a really interesting, major. Why don't you switch?" And I kind of switched because she was really cool, and I thought she was doing interesting things, so I kind of just followed her into these anthropology classes. And then I got really excited about anthropology as a field. And with my scholarship, I had an opportunity to study abroad. And because, I never even went on holidays as a young person in upstate New York because we didn't have any money to go on holiday. So it was a chance to actually go somewhere far away from home, the study abroad programs. So I studied abroad in Mongolia because I thought I should go as far away from my home as possible because this is my one chance to leave here, expecting that I would probably never really leave upstate New York. Given that our family was not very financially well off or anything like that. So then I went to Mongolia for the study abroad program, and that really kind of was the moment, I guess, when my journey into academia and Mongolian studies really began. And it was a really fantastic, it was a very immersive study abroad program where they taught language, they taught history, and actually during that study abroad program, they introduced some basic concepts from human geography. So that was really my first also introduction to geography as a discipline. And then I wound up, going back, finishing my undergraduate college, and then started working all sorts of odd jobs. Like I was a waitress for a while. I was, doing all sorts of various, worked for farms, worked for a company that was developing photographs back in the day when you would actually develop film, real film, not the digital film. So I did a lot of odd jobs. And, but I always wanted to return to Mongolia because I had a lot of friends there. And I had studied the language and I really loved learning Mongolian. So I want to go back and learn more Mongolian. And I wound up applying for a Fulbright program to go back to Mongolia. And I don't know, I think Fulbright is available for also Pakistani students to visit the US. And actually a lot of my first very, very close Pakistani friends I met who they were studying a master's degree, and I met them during my master's program. So then I went back to Mongolia, did a 1 year of Fulbright in Mongolia. And at that time, I was interested in understanding actually sort of foreigners in Mongolia, like what was their approach to development in Mongolia? How did they understand this place? What were their what were the discourses of development in this location? So I was mainly studying actually the foreign expats, the people leading the World Bank projects and this type of thing. And actually I found that there was a lot of, I don't know if discrimination is the right word, but there is a very particular view on the way that a lot of these development organizations felt that Mongolia should develop and that the investments should go into. And some of it was very kind of patronizing. So that was quite interesting. I never published that work, but maybe one day I'll have to dive back into it. I also found that there were a lot of random, like American NGOs that had found money from somewhere, and they just decided to go to Mongolia, rock up, and say, "Hey, I'm going to try to save this small community." And it was very bizarre and lots of bad outcomes, I would say. But that's a different story. So I did my year of Fulbright. Then I went back to upstate New York, wound up applying for a master's degree at Cornell. Did a 2-year master's degree at Cornell. I actually studied Urdu at Cornell for a year. I got a scholarship, language scholarship to study Urdu and Hindi as well. And then I actually, during my master's degree, I also didn't study geography at all. I was studying public policy, public administration. And after my master's degree, that was during the sort of economic meltdown of 2008-9. And all the jobs I wanted to go into were not available because it was a hiring freeze. And so I actually worked as the director of an art gallery for a year. that was really exciting, interesting. I've always loved art, pottery, that kind of thing. And then I realized that I needed to kind of return to my original interests. And then I went back to work as an academic administrator at Cornell, doing like secretarial work for actually the South Asia program there. And then I applied for a PhD program, and then went to, was expecting to stay at Cornell. Got rejected from Cornell. That was my #1 program that I wanted to go to, but I had applied for Oxford and Cambridge, and I got accepted to both Oxford and Cambridge. And I wound up going to Oxford, mainly because of its incredible interdisciplinary program in geography, which we'll talk about in a little while. And I've been basically here at Oxford ever since 2011 I came here. So you can see that my journey was not necessarily planned. There were a lot of twists and turns along the way, but I felt like those were all really important experiences, character building experiences, and doing the physical hard work of multiple jobs was really important to me, because you learn so much through those experiences. So that was, that's kind of my journey. That's how I got to where I am today. And now I am working as a departmental lecturer at the School of Geography and the Environment. And I teach human geography, and I'm very lucky to have Wahid as one of the students in our program. And I want to also encourage anyone on this call who's interested in doing further work, as a master's student or PhD student, to please consider applying for our program. And I hope that we can talk more about that as well as we go forward in the presentation. So I wanted to, I wanted to check, is my internet connection working okay? I know it might have cut out a couple times.
Yeah, it's good. But there were some breaks in between, but I think we can hear you and we can understand. So that's good.
Okay, great. So does anyone have any questions now? Because then I'm going to move into like what is geography in a moment. But does anyone I saw a couple hands go up when I was talking. Did anyone want to ask anything? Or ask, I can talk slower if I'm going too fast.
Yeah, I think we are doing good so far, and maybe we can also come to the questions at the end as well. So even if anybody has any questions just personally to ask Ariell, maybe we can go towards them at the end.
Okay, perfect. That sounds great. So I'm going to go back into share mode to talk about what is geography, and just getting it queued up here. Sorry, that's my very bad, scary desktop. Please don't look at that. Okay, so what is geography? So to give just a very simple overview, geography basically there's two kind of, if you go into geography, you can kind of take two pathways. You can either go down the pathway of studying human geography or physical geography, but there's actually a lot of overlap between them. So I don't want to say that they're completely different. There's a lot of overlap, but generally there's a kind of clusters around human geography and clusters of research around physical geography. But both sides of geography are interested in understanding the relationships between society and the environment. And we give a lot of attention to concepts such as space and place. And this is in regards to researching cultures or political systems or economics, infrastructures, landscapes, environments across the world. Those concepts are applied to all of those fields. So it's actually a very, very interdisciplinary discipline. And we draw upon research and theory from, political science, economics, geology, water sciences. It all kind of comes together within this broad umbrella of geography. So you can say actually that what is geography? Geography is almost every possible academic discipline kind of brought together under this heading. So there's a lot of different strands. And if you get into geography, you can become very, very specialized in a certain subfield of geography. So for example, I might call myself a political geographer, because I'm really interested in the relationship between power and space and place. And a lot of my work is around governance and political institutions. So I'm sort of more of a political geographer. And then you can say I'm also a human geographer, because I take a more anthropological approach. And other people call themselves economic geographers. And the list goes on. Some people, there's even a subfield of geography which is mainly focused on emotions, this concept called affect, so feeling and emotion, and how certain places make us evoke certain kind of like feelings within ourselves. It kind of creates like a collective experience of a feeling. So you can see how there's a huge range of subdisciplines within geography. And to illustrate this, I wanted to just show you the research clusters at the School of Geography and the Environment at Oxford, because these are the key research clusters in our department, and all of our researchers and academics kind of fit into or one or more of these clusters. Actually, most people belong to more than one cluster. So starting at the bottom, you can see that climate systems and policy is a very huge research cluster in our department. A lot of these people work on, they're maybe doing more modeling, more kind of quantitative mathematical based modeling or statistics. Biodiversity, ecosystems, and conservation. Again, these people might have more of a background in biology or ecosystem sciences. And so they're doing more work around conservation and biodiversity. Landscape dynamics. This is where you have people studying sand dunes, the dust clouds that move from China across the world. I mean, they're modeling dust, they're understanding landscape change. Geomorphology is a really important part of this cluster. And so we have people that really specialize in that aspect, that have maybe more background as well in geology. Then we have this cluster called environmental interactions, and that is actually trying to bring together all the clusters into one. So some people that may be working on like modeling climate, but they're also interested in political dynamics. So they're bringing those two together. Then economy and society. This is the research cluster that I'm most involved in, and that's looking at the relationship between economy and society, and with a very particular interest in change and justice. So social change is a key aspect of that. Then we have, I think someone might be annotating my slides. Anyway, please don't annotate my slides if you can. And then someone else, so the technological life is another cluster. And technological life is a little difficult to kind of understand, but basically what it's looking at is the relationship between mobility, how people move through space and move through places, their environment, and also technology. So for example, understanding, and this can get into a very abstract theoretical territory, but you can just think of this as a relationship between like technology, infrastructure, ourselves, and place. And then the final research cluster, which is also quite important, is political worlds. And political worlds is interested in, like it says, place, power, and politics. And that's more of a, coming from the perspective of political geography. And so all of these clusters draw upon the kind of concepts, research from various subfields, like I mentioned. So you can see that this is quite a huge, geography is a very, very huge discipline. In fact, probably many of you are doing geography or have done geography without even realizing it. So, you can actually probably see yourself as maybe being closer to one or more of these subfields. So anyway, you can start to relate your own interests to some of these as well, hopefully. So these are our research clusters. Why geography? And the question of why geography. So basically it allows for an interdisciplinary view on contemporary and historical issues and challenges. And this is kind of rare, I think, in when you go into economics, when you go into international relations, if you go into anthropology, or even just pure biology, you aren't necessarily getting, you don't have an opportunity necessarily to look broader and get this interdisciplinary view. Often you are just very, very much in your own niche field. So this allows for an interdisciplinary view, which I think is quite unique to geography. And I think that's a really good case for why studying geography is really exciting. Secondly, geography allows you to have this cross-fertilization of ideas and concepts from across the disciplines. So actually you're always learning something new. Like I'm always learning something interesting from people who are doing economics or people who are doing biology. So it allows me to think differently, to be more innovative. Sorry, I think I got stuck. So it allows me as a human geography to think differently, maybe be more innovative, think, change maybe, or even sort of critique my own ideas, because I'm able to have dialogue with these people from other points of view. And also geography offers us this really exciting conceptual toolbox. And what I mean by that is geography, because it's so interested in space and place, they have a lot of concepts that kind of unpack those ideas, such as scale or even ways of understanding territory. So those conceptual tools can be very, very helpful for any discipline. So I think that gives you a great kind of toolbox to work with. And also geographers tend to be very nice people. So I'm just like saying, I mean, most geographers I met are quite nice. And I'd say that's another reason to study geography. So those are some ways to plug geography, you might say. And in a moment, I'm going to move on to my own research, but I'm going to stop sharing for a second to see if anyone has any questions so far about geography as a discipline. And I think we're going to save the main Q&A for the end, but just in case. Okay, cool. It sounds like everyone's happy. Great. So I'm going to start sharing again. And okay, good. So my research mainly focuses on, like I said, I'm more of a human geographer. I do political geography a bit as well. So I have these three kind of themes that I deal with in my own research. I'm interested in environmental governance, which in a way is a very, very broad topic. And also I work with mobile pastoralists and mobile peoples, which is a key aspect of my work in Mongolia. But I'm also the chair of the Commission for Nomadic Peoples. And we do a lot of work not only to do research with mobile pastoralists, but to advocate for their rights and try to have some impact on policy and development to sort of advocate for mobile pastoralists, because there's a lot of discrimination against them. And finally, a lot of my research recently has gotten into geographies of mining and infrastructure, mainly because the areas I study in Mongolia have been hugely affected by a major expansion of mining. So it's sort of like, I didn't necessarily seek out mining, but mining kind of came into the area that I was working in. And just to give some pictures to show you what this looks like. So here are some pictures of mobile pastoralism in Mongolia. And if you think about this geographically, if you think about, okay, how do we think about space, place, these issues in Mongolia, how they relate to the way people make decisions, relate to the political systems or institutions. It's actually quite dynamic, quite exciting to see how very arid climate, there's a lot of water scarcity. People practice mobile pastoralism, relying on livestock. On the other hand, it had 70 years of socialist government and sort of influenced by Soviet system. So you can see in one of these pictures, there's a well which was built during the Soviet period. And so these key points of infrastructure also changed how pastoralism has been practiced. It created specific types of like political bureaucracies. So it's interesting to see, how these dynamics take place and what changes are now happening, that it's in more of a sort of very liberal economic situation, like free trade and open sort of open economic situation. So these pictures sort of demonstrate, mobile pastoralism in the countryside. These are some of the political dynamics. There's a local meeting, local government meeting, and people getting their wool collected, and a school. So I've always been interested in, like I said, rural work, since I did a lot of that when I was a kid. So a lot of my research was always about, okay, I want to understand and study rural work in Mongolia as a way to think about, and there was a way, and so a lot of decisions about rural work happen in these, there's these political forums, people sell their wool, so it reveals all sorts of interesting dynamics and things around social change. And these are just some pictures of sort of rural work, cutting the wool and moving ger. Ger is a yurt or mobile house, moving ger. This is just one of the regions. And then now a lot of my work is moving into studying the dynamics between extraction and mobile pastoralism, because much of the territories are being transformed very, very, very quickly by in the South Gobi regions. The coal and copper being exported. In the picture on the right-hand side, sometimes the traffic is like 50 kilometers long, waiting at the border to cross and bring coal and copper across the border to China. But yet there's still mobile pastoralism, nomadic pastoralism happening. It's taking a lot of land. There's a lot of conflict around these changes because of impacts on health and dust and water and all these types of things. So we've done a lot of field work in the last few years focusing on these types of conflicts. And you can see in this picture, some of the interviews and focus groups we're doing, but also, road accidents and a bit more of the dynamics happening in those regions. And this is, again, other areas we're in. In some cases, you have some pretty big protests. So we did participatory mapping. We talked to mining companies, government, just to get a sense of, what are the policy and governance issues here around this, growth in mining. So that's mainly my personal research. And now I just want to give sort of some information on, if you're interested in studying at Oxford, some tips about that. So first of all, like I mentioned, geography is a huge discipline, and it really is open to anyone because we have so many different paths you can take into geography. And I would say, in terms of preparing yourself for geography, I would probably just read a little bit more about this subject, some very basic things. It could be through an internet search. It could be through, contacting me, and I can always send you some readings, but familiarize yourself a bit with geography in a little bit more depth. Then I would think about, okay, are you more of a political geographer? Are you more of someone who wants to do biodiversity conservation? Are you interested in water management? Think about your personal interests. And then when you apply to Oxford, you have to match your interest with the program that, if it's a master's program, with the master's program. At Oxford, in the School of Geography, we have 5 different master's programs. And it's a little bit confusing because they're all they're all similar in some ways, but also they have distinct emphases on different things. So I'm doing admissions actually for this coming academic year. And the key thing that we're looking for, well, obviously you need to have sort of like a certain grade point average. There's a threshold of having a 3.7 equivalent to 3.7 or above, but there's a little bit of flexibility on that if you have work experience or if you have volunteer experience, if you've been doing things to show that beyond academics, you've done a lot of other things. So beyond that sort of key key requirement. Having a fit with the program is really important. And I can't tell you how many students or how many applicants I've rejected because they apply for our program. They're excellent candidates. Maybe they have a 4.0 GPA, perfect, excellent, but their interests do not match what our program is teaching. So the program that I was the course director of is called the MSc in Nature, Society, and Environmental Governance. It's more interested in political geography, environmental governance. We don't necessarily teach biodiversity conservation in that master's program. So if a student writes in their personal statement that they're interested in biodiversity conservation, and that's what they want to do, then they do not fit with the program and I need to reject them. So fit, think about fit. How do you fit into these different programs? Which program matches your interest the most? And in the personal statement, which is very, very important, you need to explain in the personal statement how your interests or background or your future goals relate with that program. What motivates you to study for that program? So sometimes I read personal statements where the individual does not even write the name of the program they're applying for. They just talk in general about stuff. It's like, okay, that means to me that they don't really care that much about the program. They're just writing a personal statement, which could go anywhere. So you have to make it clear that you're interested in that program, why you're interested, what motivates you. And you can even get into details of which classes or modules you're most interested in, or which teaching staff you're most interested in working with. And then I will see, oh, wow, this person really is interested, engaged. Even if you don't have perfect English, I can see, oh, this person has capacity to grow within this program, and they have a lot of potential. And that's the type of student that I want to have in the program, someone that is engaged, motivated, excited, and explains that in that personal statement. And obviously the references are also quite important. We do read all of the references. And many people, they have maybe been working for a few years. So they submit 2 or 3 work references. But I think it's very important for this as an academic master's program to submit more academic references. So you have an opportunity to submit 3 references. And if possible, I would submit 2 out of 3 or 3 out of 3 should be academic references from your former, it could be a mentor, or it could be, someone from your past university. Or if it is through work, someone that could talk about your research interests, or the work that you've done, which is similar to academic work somehow, like your writing skills, and your research skills, or something like this. So it's okay if you don't have too many academic references, but make sure they talk about those aspects that would be more connected to the academic work. So I would say that, just to reiterate, study the program you're interested in, match your interests to that program, make sure you have a very well thought out personal statement, which talks about your motivations to study for the program, what you want to get out of it, who you want to study with, or what classes you want to take or you're most interested in. And that will be great, because that will show a fit with the program, because the key word is fit. Just like with a job application, you want to show you're the best person for that job. And here you want to show you're the best person for the for this program. I see someone said academic reference means, okay, good question. There's references or recommendation letters required as part of the application. We have up to 3. I think you have to have at least 2, otherwise your application doesn't get considered at all and it gets like thrown out basically. And we don't throw it out. The Central University just realize they say it's an incomplete, they call it an incomplete application, so they don't even send it to us to look at. So the reference letter is basically if you have a supervisor or a teacher from your undergraduate degree, then you could ask them to write a letter which explains, what you've done, your interests, what kind of student you are. So that person will write a letter, which is a recommendation for the program that you're going to study for. So that's what I mean by the academic reference letter. It means basically a recommendation letter. And you have to imagine many students have recommendation letters that are like 2 pages long or 3 pages long. So your competition, the people you're competing with, they're kind of producing those types of, they're going to be submitting that type of material. So in order to be competitive, you have to kind of politely tell your referees to write as much as they can and be as detailed as possible. Because I get all the letters saying this is the most brilliant student in the world. And if I have 140 applicants who are all brilliant students and I have to choose 30 or 40, then often if the recommendation letter tells me, okay, this person did these specific things which were brilliant, some specific examples, then I can say, oh wow, now I have a good sense of this student because their teacher told me specifically what they did. And then I can see that person more in the application. And then I'm more happy to give them accept them to the program. So you have to think each and every piece of the application is very important, and to think through each piece. And remember that there's someone like me that's going to be reading it. So you have to think about this person, it's me, Ariell, or a different person like me who's going to be reading your application. And they have to come to know who you are through that application. So think about your audience, your reader. Your reader is going to be, the person reading your application is going to be someone like me at a desk in Oxford, and they're trying to think, oh wow, how does this person fit with the program? And if you speak to your audience, then it will also be helpful for you as well to kind of construct a good application. So that's for the master's programs. I'm not sure if anyone is here who is going to be applying for undergraduate programs. It's a bit of a different system though. Okay, I see someone asking, we are already doing bees geography, so how could we apply there after our completion of bees? Okay, I'm not sure what bees means.
It's undergrad basically, yeah.
Oh, okay, great. Excellent. Yes, so perfect. You'd be in the perfect situation to complete your bachelor's and then apply. So that's exactly the perfect situation. So yeah, complete your bachelor's degree and then you can apply for the master's degree. Another important thing about this is it's okay if you did not study geography as an undergraduate student. We accept students who come from engineering, anthropology, social sciences, psychology, any type of background. You just have to explain why you now want to get into this program in geography. So it's okay if you come from a different disciplinary background. If that makes sense. Okay, I'm going to stop there so that we can open it up to like Q&A and stuff. Wahid, I'm going to hand over to you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Ariell. This is really helpful, and especially I think starting from your journey, and a lot of us can actually relate to your journey and also your study in Mongolia, because pretty similar things are happening in Chitral as well, especially with the CPEC road coming in. I think it would be more similar, which is sad, but something we can relate to. And finally, I think you have beautifully explained the whole process of applying to Oxford. I think we can also extend the same, like the same kind of line of thought to other programs that people are interested in as well. So now we open for questions. And yeah, I mean, anything you have to ask about Ariell's work or geography or, anything. I see Muntazir has his hand raised. So yeah, you can physically raise your hand or you can type in the chat, or especially if you don't want to ask in English, you can, like just say in Khowar, we can translate it as well. So there's not an issue. So we'll start with Muntazir first.
Thank you, Wahid, and thank you, Ariell. Thank you for this wonderful introduction to the work you do. I wish I could go back and do a master's in geography, although I spent most of the year at the Oriental Institute. So the only area that I actually know in Oxford is the Oriental Institute, but that's a different story. I actually have too many things to ask, but in the interest of giving an opportunity to everyone to sort of like join in the discussion, I'll just limit my thoughts to two brief questions. And I'll start by asking you sort of a permission to describe your work as environmental humanities. Is that a correct sort of like description of work that you do?
Very good question. You could call it that. It kind of spans a few different, it kind of spans a couple of different sort of subdisciplines. But yeah, you could call it environmental humanities or more sort of political geography. Because one thing that I'm myself and my broader team, because I have collaborators that I work with in Mongolia, I have my Mongolian colleagues that I work with very closely, who are researchers there. So our goal is, well, first we want to, so studies of mobile pastoralism and mobile peoples is often a bit marginalized within our disciplines. So we want to bring attention to the issues of people who are mobile. Right. Secondly, we're really interested in helping people who are less advantaged achieve more positive policy or political outcomes. So we have a policy activist or active, almost activist side to our work as well. So for example, in Mongolia, we've done all of this research looking at mining and impacts on local peoples, but also not just local peoples, within the mining sector, there's issues around like labor and, health and safety, stuff like that. So now we've worked with the Mongolian government and NGOs, human rights NGOs, to design social impact assessment guidelines, which we hope will be adopted by the government. So they're doing environmental impact assessment now, which is great, but they don't have any social impact assessment. And actually they intertwined. so through our research, we're showing, we have this evidence base, and we can say, okay, now we can show the government we have this evidence base. Here's some social impact assessment guidelines based on international principles that fit this context, the Mongolian context, which is very different than like a USA, there's not necessarily private property. There's a lot of common property, common resources. Right. So it's a different dynamic. So that's some of the kind of, you could say, advocacy work we're doing is around that. So I guess you could say, yeah, environmental humanities, but with this kind of politics dimension to it as well.
Right. So building off of that, so this is coming from my own sort of like very limited reading in the literature that has developed around environmental humanities, and I see two. So it's almost like a double move that scholars who are working in the environmental humanities field do. So on the one hand, there is sort of a focus on understanding the importance of like human experience of climate change, right? It's the human who's the center of discussion, right? And then there are like focus on dimensions of environmental conditions, political, like you're saying, political and cultural sort of dimensions, so environmental challenges and environmental conditions. And then there is, on the other hand, as almost a simultaneous, and I feel sometimes it's almost a subconscious move that has to do with decentering the human subject, right? And looking beyond the human to other than human subjectivities, other than human experiences. And I'm not saying that it's a helpful move, but I'm struggling with the idea of how to do it effectively, right? Because I think most of the work that I have come across sort of like just at some point they've moved back into the human-centered focus, and we don't really, and I think in the interest of comprehensibility, they need to be carried out, thought about, theorized simultaneously. And I guess my struggle is to how to do it effectively. And since you're in the field, I'm not asking for a panacea here. I'm just asking for a sort of your experience of like thinking about the two simultaneously and making it actually make a difference in
Yes.
terms of the work that you do?
Yeah, this is a very, very good question. And maybe it's, the nice thing is that so first of all, there are a lot of tensions and debates within geography, people butting heads around this issue, because many people say, okay, it's gone too far. The sort of, some of them more than human theories have gone too far, some people say, but we have to think about, okay, what conceptual tools does this offer us? And for the work I do, because human livestock, it's a society not just of humans, but also of, the household in Mongolia, rural Mongolia, isn't just humans, it includes their livestock. And you can see this is like a multi-species household. I don't know, you can call it this maybe. So in that sense, when you look at mining, it's obviously affecting human health, but then it affects also livestock health, which then affects human health because they're consuming the livestock. So in this sense, I think you can look at the environmental humanities helps us to slightly, like you said, decenter the human, so we can better or clearly understand this dynamic between, a human society, the livestock they depend on, rely on, but also they have, in Mongolia, there's like spiritual ties between livestock and humans. Right. It's like, because the livestock aren't just seen as like an economic thing. It's obviously they sell livestock and get money, but it's not only about that. It's also about their household wealth, their status, within the community. There's a lot of cultural beliefs are connected to livestock. So in that sense, if we look at this as more than a human or beyond human society, then we can get a bit deeper into looking at these dynamics. And also, in the case of mining, how actually the effects on livestock, these non-human but very important entities, are affecting the bigger society, and also maybe lead to more precarious livelihoods, because a lot of livestock are maybe getting killed, sick, or they don't have the same type of mobility that they used to have. But then decentering the human can go very, very far into another direction, where you're actually trying to understand the agency of minerals or of, geological formations or whatever it might be. And I think that that can also be helpful conceptually, but like you said, everyone has a different angle. My angle is more looking at governance. And if we look at minerals, it's quite interesting, because in the South Gobi, resources are valued differently based on the human society lens. And only really in the last 30 years in Mongolia has copper and gold become such a key resource that they're willing to kind of dig up these entire gigantic landscapes. Whereas before, the sort of the value was around water or pasture and livestock and that kind of thing. So you see a change in also how humans value their non-human environment. So that lens can help us think about that as well. So yeah, anyway, there's a lot of philosophical ideas involved in like some of that theory as well. But yeah, and there's also tension with a lot of geographers who say, look, if we focus too much on the non-human, then we miss out on all like human suffering that we need to deal with as well. So yeah, there's a lot of tension there. But it's a really good question.
Yeah, thank you so much for that. There are like I have to rein in my sort of like enthusiasm here to give space to other people. So I'll stop here, and then at some point, if there's time with us at the end, we can come back to some of the issues that I have in mind. Thank you so much for that.
Yeah, and also I'm also really interested to hear what you guys think about like the environmental humanities, if it's helpful, that kind of thing. So it would be great to have a discussion and open it up as well as we go on.
Yeah, I can come back to some of the thoughts that I have sort of been struggling with, not exactly reaching any point of like, okay, I have this. I'm mostly like, it's mostly a struggle that's been going on for a while now. So I can pinpoint to some of those after sort of like you have taken some questions here. I think Salim is saying something.
Thank you, Muntazir. Yeah, I'll be just looking over the questions. So Salim is next, and then Khazawat, and then we'll go to some of the questions in the chat.
Hello, am I audible?
Yes, we can hear you.
Thank you so much for the wonderful talk. So actually, I'm interested in this idea of philosophy of Anthropocene and this complexities involving this issue, environmentalism and nature, disaster age and everything. So the first question I have is that why we think of nature as something separate from human being? Um, in other words, why don't we have this relational or contextual mode of thinking, or what Donna Haraway calls tentacular mode of thinking? I mean, why we don't consider nature as a part of our own, or vice versa? So why we have this human-centric, this way of thinking or even imagining of our relation with the environment or nature in general? My second question is about this capitalist system. So actually, Israel is a fact that in this capitalist system, we treat nature as something, a cheap source of raw material. I mean, this climate crisis, each and everything, who is responsible? I mean, these Western powers who just from the colonization to this mining to back in Africa, and then this Caribbean sea and everywhere. So, and now, the burden, the consequences we people in these poor countries have to face. So the question is that, is it possible to think or even imagine of a new and better socio-political system in which we not only value this inorganic material, but also replace this consumer culture with something better or new? So these are my two questions. Thank you so much.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Salim. Fantastic points. And I totally agree with you. I mean, so when we look at it from from a point of view of geography, we pay attention to these, power structures and the power of capitalism and how it's infused in our governance institutions. And I really hope that, I do believe that there are alternatives possible and even small examples percolating, but I mean, obviously this is just my personal opinion, but I think that there's a lot more work that we all have to do collectively in terms of politically, fighting against, protesting, taking action against some of the violent, neo-colonial structures. Mining is a great example of that. But then many people are addicted to this consumer society, and then so it's not just, it's a combination of people's individual decisions, but also the institutions that we all have that are powerful and subsidizing certain companies, or subsidizing allowing certain investments to take place, and the discourses of powerful development organizations. I think a lot of development organizations have a lot of bias, and people should speak back to them, say, no, we don't want this type of development. Let's choose a different path of development. Often you see sustainable development is not necessarily sustainable maybe sustainable for certain people, but not everyone. So I think that there's a lot of almost each and every one of us should speak back to power, in whatever way we can. But the problem is that obviously there may be negative repercussions for individuals if you're in a violent state, or if people fear imprisonment or whatever, then it's difficult to speak out. But I think that more and more we need to find ways to like you just did, Salim, pinpoint, bring light to these issues and clearly state, okay, these are some of the real causes of the crisis we're in today. And I see a company like Shell and everyone say, oh, they're going into green energy. It's like, no, they should, there should be serious reparations for all the damage they've done. And why isn't that money being given to countries, like Pakistan, that are severely affected by the climate crisis, but did not cause the climate crisis? Or, there's other ways to have structural change. than just waiting for companies to think that they're going to rebrand themselves, you know. But we really we really make it easy for those companies to keep doing what they do. And then all of the a lot of my students, for example, looking for jobs after they're done with their studies and they have debt, and those places kind of capture them. So that's also frustrating for a person like me who's like, you know, there's a lot of social justice work that needs to be done. So it's like a very complex problem. And the first question was around why do we see this separation between nature and society? And you know, we need to move beyond this. And a lot of it is starting from day one when we go to school. A lot of the discourses, ideas, values that we learn in our educational systems, they embody and encompass those ideas. And it takes a lot of work to kind of undo them and to learn differently. So again, yes, we shouldn't, this idea of separation between nature and society has caused so much exploitation, land grabbing, you know, etc. So I agree, these tools, like you said, Haraway's tools, or even tools from your own cultural background should be used, should be promoted to think differently. And like I said, speak truth to power, you know, find a way to create alternatives. But it's a difficult political situation that we're in today. And I don't have all the answers, but that's just some of my own personal opinions.
Thank you. I think Salim is asking the questions of NSEC already, so I hope he does apply to the program as well. And yeah, I think it's Qazawat who has some questions as well.
Greetings, everybody. I hope you can hear me clearly.
Yes, we can.
All right. First of all, thank you, Ariell, for being here. Nice, excellent presentation. And thank you, Wahid, for inviting us here. So I basically have like 2 questions. First is about PhD. I guess maybe I missed the information on PhD application. And the second question is on geography. So let me start with the first question. So for PhD, like obviously we do our dissertation and publish some article before applying to any sort of PhD program. But the thing is, when we are writing a paper down, do we need like, sorry? Okay. So do we need like citations, like the number of citations must be like more? Like, does it matter to have more citations in your paper, or the quality of citations is what like they matter?
Okay, great question. Okay, great. Just to clarify, do you mean when you the people you're citing in your paper that you're publishing, that the people that you're citing, or yes, the people who have cited you?
The people you are citing in your research paper.
Oh, okay, great. Okay, so very good question about the PhD applications. I'm sorry I didn't cover that. But just to give you a little bit of introduction to the PhD program. The PhD program in our department, well, in Oxford in general, is a 3 to 4 year program. And they would expect you to come into the program and with a proposal. So in your application, you would include a research proposal. Right. Stating, yeah, so you guys know that maybe, but it's a bit different than the American system or North American kind of system. So yeah, but regarding your thing, not all applicants have published papers, but when they apply, so you don't have to have published papers already, but when you apply. The key issues are having a very, very good research proposal. And that research proposal, that's where you want to think about your citations, the quality. I think quality of citations is more important than quantity. Because I would make sure that you draw upon some citations or references in the last 20 years, at least in the last 5 to 10 years. And you say what they're looking for in the PhD proposal is your potential to make an original contribution to a topic. So you want to say, okay, this project is going to advance understandings in this field, or this project is building upon these, past research or whatever it might be. But the issue is using the references and your literature review in your proposal to demonstrate that you are contributing to these academic debates. Because basically you're in conversation with these academic debates. So I would think about a citation as if you're having there are other voices in your proposal, and you're kind of explaining why those voices matter in that particular context. If that makes sense.
Yeah. So the second question was on geography. So you mentioned about like clusters. There's like different clusters in geography. And before that, you mentioned some kind of like, I think, human geography and like physical geography. So I guess your work is all over Mongolia, right?
Yeah, it's mostly in, these days, it's mostly in the South Gobi, because that's where a lot of the mining is. There are some places in Mongolia that I don't do research just because it's such a big place. But yeah, generally in Mongolia. Right. I have done a little bit of work in Pakistan as well.
Okay. So apparently, like I am right now in Siberia. So from here, I hear like the Turks, the people like the people from you know, like there was a region called Turkestan, right?
Yes.
It wasn't exactly like a region, but it was some kind of like popular name for some kind of region. So apparently, I heard like the people, the Turks, came from Altai Mountains, right? Like to the west of Mongolia.
Yeah, well, so there was a lot of traveling across that region. So there's like still what they would call like ancient Turkish standing stones, long, tall stones in Mongolia, across all of Mongolia. So, you know, there's actually the Mongolian language is related to Uyghur, which is in Western China. And that was part of old Turkestan, I guess you could say. That's why the Uyghurs want to have Turkestan today, except they're being oppressed by the Chinese. So there's that broader movement trying to, yeah, exactly as you say, the broader region of basically it's like Western China, parts of Central Asia, and I guess you could, not necessarily parts of contemporary Mongolia, but there's a relationship between those areas for sure.
Right. So I was asking if you have like any kind of works or citations about these people who originated from Altai, because like whenever I go out here in Siberia, they say like I might be a Turk, or like when I was in America, they used to tell me like I'm from Turkey. I'm not like, I do not look like Pakistani at all. So it was like quite strange. So I was thinking if you can provide some works or like a research paper on this, which has been published on this region.
Yeah, that's very interesting. There's actually like a lot written, weirdly enough, on like the music of the Altai areas. Yeah. The Altai is interesting because it's where the borders of 4 countries. So you have Russia, Mongolia, China, and maybe it's 3 that kind of meet in that zone. So yes. If you note your email in the chat, then I can I can do some.
Great. Sure. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you, Fazal. Yeah, so then we have a question in the chat about GIS, and somebody's asking, so how is GIS helping addressing the issues around the world?
Good question. That's a great question. So GIS is really interesting because on one hand, GIS is basically just a form of, you know, mapping and visualizing things spatially. On the other hand, we have some, there's sort of like critical GIS studies, which are trying to actually understand, you know, the spatializations of different issues in a more kind of critical way, rather than just forming like a representation. So GIS is a useful tool, which you can use in a whole range of ways. And it is a really useful thing to understand how to use, and especially the more advanced kind of GIS. So you can use GIS in more quantitative or physical geography, and you can also use it in human geography. So actually GIS is a tool that you use across all of geography, and a lot of it depends on your interests. And weirdly enough, we do have a couple of GIS specialists in our department, but not as many as you would expect. So so it's definitely like an emerging, you know, there's a lot more interest, and a lot of future employers, I think, will be very, very happy to have people with GIS skills. So it's definitely a good thing to kind of study and come to understand. I think there's open software for GIS that you can play with as well. But yeah, it's a really good tool.
Okay, thank you. I think so I'm just reading out these questions so that people who watch the video later know what we are talking about. So there is a question from Alia, and she asks about, so I wonder how can we sustain pastoralism in remote mountain areas that are already affected by climate disasters? And what adaptation mechanism can we implement there to sustain their livelihood sources?
That's a great question. So I would start by asking the pastoralists themselves, because pastoralists live in usually quite extreme environments and are used to dealing with natural disasters. So I think that development agencies have kind of led this idea of, oh, you know, pastoralists don't know what to do in the case of extreme, natural disasters. Actually, if you look at Mongolia or any place that pastoralists live, they live in the most extreme environments of the world. Extreme climate variability. In Mongolia, they live in plus 50 Celsius to minus 50 Celsius. There's winter disasters, etc. I would look more at the political system. What is it about the changes in the political system that have made pastoralists more vulnerable? Is it because in Mongolia, for example, now the state doesn't support them in any way, so the individual households have to often take out huge amounts of debt to keep their, to move to a new location or to keep their animals alive. And so there's a big problem around debt and household precarity. And that's a political economic issue, which didn't exist in the socialist period. Often it's not, so think bigger than just how can pastoralists adapt, how can the political situation, how can the political system adapt, how can governance institutions adapt. And another big problem is that pastoralists often have lost their ability to be mobile, often because land has been taken away from them or different infrastructure has been built that has cut their roots. And the key way that pastoralists have always adapted and dealt with natural disasters is through mobility, moving to places either with more water availability or better conditions. And once that mobility is taken away, you're restricting and limiting a key adaptation mechanism. So I would say maybe a key way to help them is to look at the governance systems, find ways that they can have more rights in decision making. So empower the pastoralists to, decide for themselves what is a way to adapt, since they already know their environment so well. And then fight for their rights so that they have right to move, right to lands that they may have lost, and think about those things. So that's my personal view, having looked at many pastoralist societies and what's happening in Mongolia. So anyway, I can go on for an hour about that. I feel very strongly about some of the discrimination that many states, development organizations, and other groups have done to pastoralists, and they're often treated as sort of criminals, which they're not. So anyway, that's my impassioned take on that issue. Thank you, Alia, for the good question.
Thank you. And the next question is about, so this is from Imran, and Imran is saying that, so resources are already scarce in the world, especially in developing countries. Considering this, what role geologists are playing for the efficient allocation of resources in these areas?
Ooh, that's a good question. I'm not sure if I have a very good answer to this question. So, okay, from a point of view of researchers, so researchers, whether they're geologists or geographers or whatever, sometimes their expertise is used to make these decisions by people who are in power to make the decisions, and sometimes they're not. So you often see companies and governments deciding how those resources might be allocated, or other powerful landlords or whatever thing. So it's kind of like, in some cases, researchers are their skills or their expertise is drawn upon. In other cases, not necessarily. It might be other disciplines or development organizations or whatever. So in a way, perhaps in some ways, researchers are a little bit lower on the totem pole, unfortunately, in terms of their role in thinking about these issues around decision making or governance of resources. Although I think maybe slightly it's changing, but it requires academics and researchers to really push hard and make their research known to governments and other decision makers, which is hard to do sometimes as academics because they have so many different things that they need to do on a daily basis, like with teaching and publishing. So then it becomes, there's a lot of time constraints in that side. I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, I think it does. Thank you. Yeah, so there are more questions. This one is from Javed Faruqi, and he's saying that keeping in view the physical geography of South Asia, how much are you optimistic about the success of the BRI in Pakistan, specifically in infrastructure sector? And he has looked through your profile and seen some of your research on this.
Yeah, that's a great question. I back in 2017, I think it was, I had a great experience in Pakistan, doing a lot of work talking to various people in the ministries and other organizations about CPEC, and that was very, very interesting because at that point, I think a lot of the plans were kind of emerging, and it depends. I think like with railroads, I had an experience of speaking to some of the people involved in updating the railroad system. I think that there might be some really exciting opportunities there, but in other areas, like for example, I don't know if this is still happening necessarily, but with energy development in Pakistan, if it's going to be like coal energy or this kind of thing, I think that is probably not such a great thing to invest in. So it's probably good to think critically about each and every project. There was a really interesting article that came out by Atif Ansar and his colleagues at the business school. And it was looking at, a very large number of Chinese projects. And they wanted to ask this question, like everyone thinks that Chinese do excellent, the infrastructure that Chinese built is the best. That's kind of like the idea, better than or faster than what other countries can do. And they actually found that about 50% of the infrastructure projects were duds. Like for example, roads were built, no one was driving on those roads. Power systems were built, so they're like economic duds. They actually created a lot of debt for that country. And the other half were useful infrastructure, needed infrastructure. So their recommendations were to look very critically at each and every project to understand, okay, what type of energies it's using, how does this impact the local environment, the local society, what will the future impacts of these projects be, and then look at each project individually and then make a call. So I would say that in a way, OBOR should be broken down into its different projects, and also looking closely at which companies are investing, because it's also a huge diversity in companies and projects. It's probably some will be successful and others will maybe lead to more negative consequences. So I guess that's a very diplomatic answer, but I would say that, you have to look at each project quite critically. And I would hope that Pakistan doesn't get more coal power plants from it, although I know energy is such a critical issue. And this is a difficult issue actually, because a lot of people argue for coal because they say this is the best way to get people energy, and it's a human rights issue because people have a right to energy. But on the other hand, it becomes a complicated thing in terms of, in the long run, is that the best decision? So anyway, I'm just putting out all these different factors.
Thank you. I think one good thing that the current government has done is it has actually banned coal from China. So that's a good sign. But yeah, there are issues. So okay, so moving on. There's another question from Uwais. He says, thank you for the session.
I have another question that how much
Yeah, we can hear you. Can you continue with your question, Javed Saab?
I'm asking about the environmental impact of these CPEC projects. Is the Pakistan government is following standard operating procedures or the environmental assessments in terms of CPEC projects?
Mm.
Mm.
This is a very good question. Actually, I'm curious about, because I've been studying this extensively in Mongolia, but I'm not sure what the legal system is for the Mongolian national requirements for environmental impact or social impact assessments. Do any of you guys know if there are legal, like national laws for those things?
With Pakistan, it's interesting because there have been like really few, the assessment on CPEC so far. And one of the reasons, because, like we are working on this in our the Silk Road Society initiative. So I think the issue is because CPEC is everywhere and nowhere in a way, and it's so much into patches in different parts. Like there have been only, I think there's been only one assessment, environmental assessment of this, but definitely there are people who are calling for, like more environmental assessment. And I don't know, Ariel, if you know Malik Amin Aslam. Apparently he was also in the SOGI department in '95. So he's the current minister of climate change to the prime minister. So I think he has been really pushing towards looking at some of the environmental impacts, but there isn't enough government assessment of this so far.
Yeah, it's quite interesting because if you look at in Mongolia, they also have the side like an obor. It's the China, Mongolia, Russia basically corridor, and so there's two ways that you can have, well, multiple ways, but you can think of it this way. The company who comes into the company who comes to invest in Pakistan, for example, to build a road, they have to obviously follow the national laws of Pakistan. So if Pakistan has clear requirements for social and environmental impact assessment, then that company should do those things. If they don't, if the country doesn't have those things, then the investor might have standards like the IFC has performance standards or the Asian Development Bank. But if you look at Chinese investment, it's very diverse because you have the China Import-Export Bank, you have the China Agricultural Development Bank that are all investing in CPEC. So you have a huge range of investors. Plus you have the Asia Infrastructure Investment Bank, but that only actually is a small minority of investment in the Belt and Road. And each of those investment banks have slightly different standards, but they often aren't as strong on social impact assessment. Obviously, social and environmental things are quite closely connected. And because a lot of the projects are bilateral agreements, there may be some softer laws applied. So it's very complex. Like Wahid said, it's neither here nor, it's like BRI is everywhere and nowhere, or CPEC is everywhere and nowhere. So it's very difficult to find information. It's not very transparent necessarily. So it's a very, very good question. I would say that actually that's a great area of like more in research or investigation to actually find exactly what's happening with projects in Pakistan in that case.
Thank you so much, Javed Saab. I think, yeah, so Obes is asking about, so he's asking that, would we have any chance to work on a research under your supervision without taking admission in Oxford University?
Oh, good question. I get this question quite a lot. So usually, unfortunately, so a lot of people think that at Oxford we have lots of extra funding to employ people, but we don't. We have to apply to external grants to get funding, and so it's difficult to kind of have a research assistant or a researcher in Oxford if you don't have funding, which I know is terrible, and actually it's a big problem that we face. So I would say that a really good thing to do is Oxford has a lot of open events, that you can participate in, including our research clusters. So I would recommend like getting involved with attending our research clusters and building connections with our research community. And over time, developing those collaborations, there may be more opportunities. It partially depends on, so Wes, if you're at an institution, already at a Pakistani institution, then it's easier to create institutional ties. If you're just an individual who's an independent researcher, it's a little bit more difficult, but I would invite you to just come to our events, become part of our community. it's not limited to just people in our department. It's open to the public. So please be, please feel free to be involved, and then finding ways to collaborate like this as an independent researcher can work. So there's a lot of opportunities for collaboration, but not necessarily where you have like a research position with getting paid. You know what I mean? It's more of like an independent collaboration that you can develop. But yeah, good question.
Thank you, Ariell. I think we'll have time to take two more questions.
Wahid, may I ask?
Sure.
May I share my? Okay, thank you, Ariell and Wahid. This is a very nice session today. Being yeah, there is a branch that is biogeography. So, being a biology teacher, let me. I am going to ask something about this. Yeah, the word is, that we are possessing geopolitical differences. We are possessing biological differences and biogeographical differences. So these are actually the beauty of this nation, that is actually due to difference or partition or compartmentalization regarding fauna and flora of the universe. So here regarding this thing, actually there are certain projects running. Some of them are in bottleneck in Pakistan, like this billion tsunami tree project. So actually I am asking about these major projects, their impacts on environment. Rather, these are good for bad. For example, if you are looking in Chitral, so most of the plants which are introduced here in Chitral, that are not indigenous plants of Chitral. So I am really, while reading about eco safety, and I am very concerned regarding such type of steps they are taking. First, my question is that how there are certain rules, international protocols regarding such type of unplanned introduction of plant and animals in certain areas. Another one is this globalization, and the world is going to be a global village. So actually we are going to lose the uniqueness of the parts of the world. So if it is going to be globalized, I'm asking that how this uniqueness will be, it will be mixed, and uniqueness of the certain areas and certain countries, they will be mixing with others regarding, human nature, regarding plant and animal mixing conditions. So how it will be impacted. And lastly, I am going to ask Ariell that how we will be effective as a teacher to sensitize students regarding be careful about the introduction of such non-indigenous plants and animals in certain places, because if plants are introduced, certainly indigenous animal will go out, and new of them are more prone to come to the area. So these are some of the questions I am asking from madam. Thank you very much.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Zafar. Those are great questions. And it's very interesting, this issue. Oh, can you guys hear me okay? I wasn't sure if my sound is still okay. It's a very interesting issue, this billion tsunami tree project. Thank you for raising it. And yes, you really nailed it on the head. You really addressed and said the key problem around, actually, you see this in a lot of places where different plant species are being introduced which are not indigenous, and it can have very negative effects on that landscape. And so I would advocate for use of indigenous species, obviously, and even if it's a grass species, it doesn't have to be a tree species, because also grasslands, hold a lot of carbon as well. So if the key goal is to do carbon capture, then you can do that using lots of different species. There's a very interesting example in Siberia now, where I don't know if you guys have heard of this kind of place where actually they're cutting down the trees, desperately cutting down the trees, because they want to ensure that the permafrost doesn't melt. And if you have too many trees, it warms things differently, and then the permafrost melts. And if you keep it a grassland, it actually keeps it more cold and frozen. So it's a funny effect, right? It's like the opposite of, it's the opposite of forestation. They actually say we want to keep a grassland to keep it cool in the proper conditions. So part of it, like you said, the key issue is understanding the local environment. what grows there, what can be sustained there. What I see a lot in Mongolia is the mining companies, to offset their carbon or whatever, they also try to plant trees in a place in the Gobi Desert which gets such a minimal level of water each year. Then it requires them to water so much, water these trees using imported water, which doesn't make sense, because that's not a sustainable, if we think about sustainability, that's not a sustainable solution to import water from, a different location to put on these trees. Rather, I would think, okay, just, use the indigenous species and plant those, keep them healthy. So it's very ironic, like you said. And it's a very good question regarding the international protocols. And I would have to check, actually, because I don't know if the IUCN has actually made any statements about this, but it seems like it's becoming more of a big issue, because you see, actually, weirdly enough, this forestation can cause negative environmental impacts. And so, it's complex in this sense. But I haven't actually seen recently international protocols, but I suspect there might be some things out there that I'm just not aware of right now. And then yes, I will definitely try my best to also give this example to students to encourage them to be careful about, that just planting trees everywhere is not not necessarily going to have a positive environmental impact. And about globalization, it's a really good question, and something that I often think about and struggle with myself. I don't know if I have a good response to this, other than I think it is a big concern. And, for example, even just retaining language, language fluency, and rather than, English can become more, English concepts can become enriched through ideas from other languages, rather than always exporting English ideas into language. So I think that there could be some positive exchange, but on the other hand, like you said, we need to be very, very careful about not, what is the word, cultricide or something, cultricide. It's like the extinguishing of so much beautiful diversity in our world. So, this is something that I struggle with as an individual person. And the main thing I would say is these types of forums, like what Wahid has organized, is a fantastic way to keep the culture and society alive in this sense, even through this new technology.
Thank you so much, Ariell. I think we're almost over time, but is it okay if we take one more question?
Yes, of course.
Okay. Aslam, I think you would be the last.
Thank you so much, Wahid and Ariell, for the brief introduction about geography and the branches of geography. Actually, I'm also a master's student of physical geography at Chinese Academy of Sciences. So I have one question, and that question is always, have confusion in my mind. That is about the word sustainability. We always talk about sustainability in environmental science, the geography, in geology. So I want to know that does this word has any practical implication in the real world? We always talk about that we want to make our world sustainable. We want to make our environment sustainable. So with the passage of time, like the land cover, land use are changing, the climate is changing, the global warming is increasing, the population increasing. So how we can sustain the environment in terms of sustainability? This is my first question. And the second question is about the PhD application process in Oxford. Actually, I'm also a master's student. Like for PhD, like which two process? Like if someone has if someone write statement for application process, and if someone has more publication in his area, so which one has the more probability to get the chance of a PhD scholarship or admission at Oxford? So these are my two questions. Thank you so much.
Brilliant. Okay, thank you, Assam. Great question. Okay, I'll start on the PhD question. maybe it's a bit easier. The other question is quite a good question, but very big. So with the PhD application, so this is a really important point actually, because, you know, again, it goes back to that research proposal that you submit. So in your PhD application, you will have your just general application, which includes, you know, your name and your personal information. Then you have to submit your research proposal, and it can be, I think, 2,500 words, 2,500 words, something like this, maybe a little bit over. And then you also submit your CV, and you submit your writing sample, you know, an excerpt from something you wrote that you can give as an example of your past writing. And then you have to also include your academic recommendation letters. And so that's your package for your PhD application. And this year I reviewed 10 PhD applications, but our department usually gets a lot, but we can also accept quite a few. I think we accept about 60 people per year, but then around 40 people actually turn up because of the funding problems. So when I receive a PhD student application and I see all these different parts of the application, you can think each part is equally important. So on your CV, you might have a list of your publications. And in a way, it doesn't matter how many you have, it's the quality of publication. It's the quality of your publication.
I got it. Yeah, it's depend upon the quality of the papers, right?
Yeah, sorry. Okay.
Okay, okay.
But I also want to tell you that, for example, if you publish one paper in like a geography journal, like Area or Journal of, you know, Development and Change or whatever, that's going to be much better than publishing 10 articles in journals that are not recognized.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Thank you.
You know what I mean?
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, good. I hope that makes sense. Excellent. And this is
I got it. It's been like, we need to focus on the quality, not on the quantity.
Exactly. You got it. Definitely. And also another important.
So my second question.
I have to tell you something important to everyone who's interested in applying for PhDs. You have to make contact with someone that you want to work with. You have to do this probably at least six weeks in advance, or even 2 months in advance of the application.
Acceptance, like, right?
Yeah, you should write to them and say, I'm very interested in working with you. I appreciate your work. This is what I want to do. You can give them a short abstract, then try to arrange a meeting with that person, because that's a very key aspect of how it's evaluated. Does this potential student have supervision available? If there's no supervisor available to you, you probably won't be accepted. So you have to they can assign you a supervisor, but it's much better if you also make contact in advance with someone. So look through all the staff website, check to see who do you match with, and then email them. And don't worry, they always get emails, so it's fine. The sustainability question. Well, I mean, like you said, it's always so ironic because sustainability as a word is used in so many different contexts. So sometimes it's like, what is this? It's used everywhere. So what's the meaning of it? And so how can we be sustainable? I mean, it's very difficult now that we're in, like, I mean, as the person brought up at the beginning of our conversation, we live in this sort of like capitalist society, which is addicted to consumerism. And that is fundamentally a big issue in terms of emissions and, you know, sustainability and everything. So, you know, it's a systemic issue. It's a systemic issue, which is not just one thing, but it's a lot of interconnected things. And also I think that over time, a lot of the experts in sustainability, like indigenous people, have been marginalized, silenced, made invisible. So really we should think about who are our experts and give the voices to people who really have practice sustainable livelihoods and understand what struggles they're facing, and then address it through political action. But it's again, I don't have just one answer. That's the key challenge of our time. And like you said, maybe we need to come up with some new words. Is there a word for sustainability in your language?
I don't think so.
The word. Yeah, we have the word.
what is the word for sustainability?
Sustainability, we call mustahkam. No. Actually, I
Maybe.
don't remember, but there is a word.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Patrek, sir. Patrek, sir. Patrek. Sustainability, Patrek.
Okay, maybe there's a word then.
It's interesting. I mean, you guys can almost like start with this, like, okay, explore all the possible translations. How does it actually play out? Maybe you'll come up with a much better idea or concept or word that we can use, you know.
Okay, thank you so much, everyone. I think we are over time. And again, thank you so much, Ariell, for your time and for being here. Hopefully this is only a start, and hopefully we'll be able to do more work with you in the future as well in different aspects of Chitral academics. Yeah, I think usually the trend is we ask somebody to close the discussion. So I think Muntazir would be the concluder for today.
If I must. So let me begin with a funny sort of anecdote. Somewhere in South Asia, there was a poetic soiree, and at the end, a relatively minor poet was asked to sort of like give vote of thanks or sum up what was recited and everything. And he said, I feel like a mosquito who has been invited to a nudist colony. I know what to do, but I don't know where to start. So that's sort of my feeling right now. This has been a wonderful discussion today with Ariell, and I think on behalf of everyone here who are present here, and on behalf of the people who work with Chitral academics, I say thank you. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your scholarship. Thank you for your thoughts on so many different aspects of your work. And I think especially with respect to sort of like extending and widening the academic reach in terms of like enabling students, aspiring young scholars about ways of sort of like traversing the treacherous, I must say, route to Oxford. Thank you for that. Obviously, there is a lot here in terms of, because I see many parallels in what we are going through in Chitral and in the broader northern region in Pakistan, and with the work you do in Mongolia. And I think there's a lot here to think about. There's a lot here to share in sharing of ideas and in sharing of insights across these various fields, and sort of make them applicable in very specific local contexts. I obviously have like a number of things still in my mind that I would been very happy to discuss, and especially with respect to how this the relationship between animals, domesticated animals and human beings, and then there is a sort of like a sacred sort of geography and a sacred sort of geology attached to it, and there are a number of things we could go on, but obviously we don't have time. So I'll just end by saying thank you once again, and thank you for, I'm sure you're an inspiration given your experience, given where you have come from, and given the kind of important work you're doing. You are an inspiration for at least the people who are here right now. Thank you so much for your time, and thank you, Wahid, for enabling us to listen to Dr. Ariell, and thank you to the participants as well.
All right, thank you so much. Hopefully we will see you again, Ariell, in this platform.
Definitely. Thank you so much. And I just want to say, you know, we almost never get, we have very few people Pakistanis applying to our program. And so I would say you need to apply, please do this, because, you know, the more very, very, very happy to see applicants from Pakistan. It always catches my eye and I always perk up my, my senses. So please keep that in mind. And yes, so I encourage you to know that this is open to you. Feel free to ask questions and reach out if you have any, any questions or need some more one-on-one advice. Thank you so much, Chitral Academics. You guys are amazing. I love being here, and it's a huge honor. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Take care, everyone. See you all next weekend. All right. Bye-bye.